Hello music fans, welcome to the Death by Unicorn channel for another episode of What's New 2023, where I talk about new albums that came out in metal, rock, and prog over the past week. Today I'm going to talk about 6 albums, and I'll talk about them in my order of preference, starting with Voyager and Fearless in Love. This is progressive metal with electronic and pop rock influences. This band, this is their 8th album. They're from Australia, and they recently had their song Promise featured in the 2023 Eurovision Song Contest final, where they placed 9th out of 26 in that final. They had previously tried to qualify for Eurovision in 2022 with their song Dreamer, which is also on this album and also a really catchy song. Really every song on this album is really catchy and poppy, but they have some of that prog metal aesthetic in their songs, including in Promise, the song that was in Eurovision. They have a brief screaming part, which is probably not super common for that Eurovision song scene. The whole album is kind of like prog metal with the guitars. They have a genty tone to them, but the drums are always playing more of a poppy dance beat, so there's not too many like odd time signature things going on. There is some cool like syncopation and polyrhythmic stuff, but all the songs are very accessible, mostly if not always 4/4. I'd say I'd call this album kind of like genty pop is kind of my description for it. It's got a lot of 80s synth pop vibes, and it relies a lot on synthesizers. I wish they had won the Eurovision Song Contest to put prog metal on the map a bit more with that mainstream audience, but maybe next time. Next, I want to talk about Ring Van Mobius. Ring Van Mobius, they released Commission Works Part 2, 6 Drops of Poison. That's the name of the album. And this is progressive rock, and it's the 3rd album by this Norwegian retro symphonic prog band. For fans of Emerson, Lake and Palmer and King Crimson, the whole album sounds like it could have been made and released in the early 70s. There are lots of long instrumental sections, but there are also some vocals on the album. Though the vocals are not really the standout feature of the album, it's all about the keyboards and the mellotrons. My favorite track on here is the 9th chapter, The Echoes, which includes multiple parts. Part A, The Drifting, Part 2, and Part B, Directions. I got the interesting story behind this album from their Bandcamp page. It was spring 2021, and the band Ring Van Mobius was approached by a performer and choreographer, Harold Bihari, to write music for his next solo performance. And that started a collaborative process that involved various artists with different artistic expressions, which culminated in January 2022 with the premiere of Batty Boy in Oslo, Norway, and the project was nominated for the Norwegian Critics Association Prize 2022. This album, however, is not the actual soundtrack for the finalized commissioned work. It's a reflection of the early visions for that project. It's kind of reactions and a starting point for further collaboration, according to the band. So this is an independent body of work based on their early initial musical ideas. It's loosely inspired by, but not limited to, the original concept by Harold Bihari. So when they were working with this choreographer, they produced a demo recording, recorded a bunch of initial ideas, and then those demos became a reference for this album. They were also a reference for the work that they ultimately did for that choreographer, but the material was taken in different directions in both cases. So this album was further developed solely by Ring Van Mobius, even though it emerged from that common source material. And yeah, it's really cool. I think fans of 70s prog will like this a lot. Next up, I want to talk about United Progressive Fraternity and their album Planetary Overload Part 2, Hope. This is the third album by this Australian band, another Australian band to feature on my list today. It's a long album, it's 2 hours long. It's got a strong environmental message, features a lot of notable guest musicians. There's an almost 21-minute long prog epic that features Colin Edwin of Porcupine Tree, Ryo Okamoto of Spock's Beard, Steve Hackett of Genesis, and more. The whole album here has great playing. I think fans of Ayreon will like this because it's kind of got that similar spirit in that it brings together a collective of people and features different guests and collaborators and has like a unifying concept to it. But there's more jazz influences on this than in Ayreon, and there's more horns. So it's kind of like Ayreon meets Thank You Scientist, I'd say. Next up, I want to talk about Bradley Hall and his work called Bean Theater. It's kind of short. It's like an EP, just 2 tracks, but one of the tracks is a prog epic that's like over 20 minutes long. It's comedic progressive metal. It's the 3rd time this year that Bradley Hall has made a parody album imitating a band style. He sets a time limit for himself of 24 hours to make an album, and he live streams the process of him creating it. So this album parodies Dream Theater, while the previous albums that he's done for this year parody Megadeth and Metallica. And yeah, this album is just 2 tracks. The first is a 17-second track called Overture, and then the main track is a long epic called 69 Degrees of Inner Chungus. So really hilarious and actually really well done musically. Like the guitar riffs sound like Dream Theater. The keyboard playing on here, he featured a friend of his, I forget his name, on keyboards, who does a really great job. The vibes here really sound like Dream Theater. The vocals are a little bit of a joke and kind of parody James LeBrie. Same thing with the lyrics. They're definitely really jokey, but it sounds like an awesome Dream Theater epic. So check this out if you're a fan of Dream Theater and want to be entertained and want to have a laugh. Next up, I want to talk about Dream the Electric Sleep and their album American Mystic. This is progressive rock with post-rock, alternative, and indie rock influences. It's the 5th album by this American band. I've never listened to an album by them before, but I heard the single Beyond Repair. That got me interested. The album is kind of proggy, but it has lots of alternative music vibes to me. So if you're a fan of stuff like Radiohead, you want to hear that kind of mixed with Pink Floyd, but there's also some moments on here that get really catchy and poppy, even like getting close to Journey and Genesis in their like pop rock, stadium rock mode. So if you're a fan of this sound, of how that sounds and mixing all those ideas together, check out this album American Mystic by Dream the Electric Sleep. And lastly, I'm going to mention Agusa and their album Prima Materia. This is instrumental, progressive, psychedelic space rock. It's the 5th album by this Swedish band, and it's all instrumental except the last track, which has some wordless vocalizations. The first song is an almost 15-minute prog epic. The playing on this album is great. The compositions are great here too, but it's a little too jammy for my taste, and that's why I'm mentioning it last on my list today. Sounds like there could be some improvisation on the album, which is cool, but I prefer listening to like composed, intricately arranged and composed music. I would also like this a lot more if they got a great vocalist, because I feel like the music is missing something here, but what they do lay down is pretty great. And that's it for these 6 albums that I checked out that came out over the past week. Hopefully something on this list sounds of interest to you. Let me know what you think of these albums, or let me know if there are some other albums that came out recently that you think I'd enjoy. Until next time, peace out.